3 months after I buried my husband, I found a metal box hidden in his desk. Inside were letters from a woman I'd never heard of, talking about a daughter who had Vincent's eyes and called him Daddy. A daughter I never knew existed. A daughter who'd been part of his life for 20 years while I believed I was his entire world. What I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about love, marriage, and the people closest to your heart. Because sometimes, the person sleeping next to you every night for 35 years can be a complete stranger. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 73 years old. I'm sitting here in my kitchen right now, the same kitchen where I cooked thousands of meals, celebrated birthdays, and held my children when they cried. The yellow daffodils I picked from my garden this morning are wilting on the counter, but I can't bring myself to throw them away. Everything wilts eventually, doesn't it? When I get overwhelmed telling this story, I step outside to my garden. It's become my sanctuary since Vincent passed. I talk to my roses, confess my fears to the cardinals that nest in our oak tree. People think I'm crazy, but plants and birds don't judge you. They just listen. But let me take you back to where this all began. Back to 1983, when Vincent was just 21 years old and made a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. I met Vincent at a church social in downtown Chicago in 1987. I was 26, working as a secretary at a law firm. And he was this charming 28-year-old construction worker, with the most beautiful brown eyes I'd ever seen. What I didn't know then was that Vincent had already lived a lifetime of regret before we ever met. In 1983, Vincent was dating a girl named Catherine Morrison. They were both young, reckless, and completely unprepared for what happened when Catherine got pregnant at 19. Vincent's strict Catholic family, especially his domineering father, demanded he do the right thing and marry her immediately. But Vincent panicked. At 21, he wasn't ready for marriage or fatherhood. One night, terrified by the pressure from both families and his own fears about being trapped in a life he didn't want, he disappeared. Just packed his things and moved 3 hours away to Chicago, leaving Catherine to face the pregnancy alone. Isabella was born in December 1984. Vincent didn't even know she existed until Catherine tracked him down 6 months later through his construction company. Here's what makes Vincent's story more complex than simple abandonment. When Catherine found him in 1985, she wasn't looking for marriage or even a relationship. She was a single mother, working 2 jobs, and she needed help. Vincent was consumed with guilt, not just for running away, but for missing his daughter's birth, her first smile, her first word. "I was a coward," Vincent wrote in a journal I found later. "I ran from responsibility and became the kind of man I'd always despised." How do you come back from that? How do you tell the woman you love that you abandoned your own child? Vincent started visiting Isabella and sending money, but he made Catherine promise to keep it secret. His father had disowned him when he ran away, calling him no son of mine. Vincent's mother had cried for weeks. He couldn't bear to tell his family he'd been lying about his whereabouts. Couldn't admit that he had a daughter he'd abandoned. By the time Vincent met me in 1987, he was trapped in a web of lies that seemed impossible to untangle. He'd told me he'd never been in a serious relationship, never been close to marriage. How could he suddenly reveal that he had a 3-year-old daughter? Our courtship was like something out of a movie, but Vincent carried his secret like a stone in his chest. He'd pick me up after work every Friday in his old blue Chevrolet, and we'd drive to Lake Michigan to watch the sunset. He told me about his dreams of starting his own construction company, and I shared my hopes of having a house full of children and laughter. What I didn't know was that every time I talked about wanting children, Vincent died a little inside. He already had a child, a beautiful, bright little girl, who was growing up thinking her father didn't want her. We married in June 1989, in the same church where we first met. I still remember walking down that aisle in my grandmother's wedding dress, seeing Vincent's face light up with what I thought was pure joy. Now I wonder if there was guilt mixed in with that happiness. On our wedding night, Vincent almost told me. Years later, I found a draft of a letter he'd written, but never sent. "Eleanor, before we start our life together, I need you to know about Isabella. I need you to know that I've made mistakes, that I'm not the man you think I am. But he never sent that letter. Instead, he promised himself he'd find a way to be a good father to Isabella, while building a new life with me. The early years of our marriage were challenging in ways I never understood at the time. Vincent's construction business took off in the mid-90s, but he was often gone on weekends, claiming he needed to check job sites or meet with clients. What he was really doing was driving to Millerville to spend time with Isabella. Catherine's letters, which I found decades later, painted a picture of a man torn between two lives. Isabella asks why you can't come to her school play. Catherine wrote in 1992. She's 8 years old. Vincent, she doesn't understand why her daddy can only visit her in secret. But Catherine wasn't blameless in this deception. She'd fallen in love with Vincent during those early visits, hoped that somehow he'd choose her and Isabella over his new life. Her letters revealed a woman clinging to hope that Vincent would one day leave his wife for his daughter's sake. I know it's selfish, Catherine wrote in 1994, but every time you visit, I pretend we're a real family. Isabella lights up when she sees you, and for a few hours, I let myself believe that this is how it could always be. Vincent's guilt deepened with every visit. He was watching Isabella grow up in snapshots, birthday parties he attended in secret, school events where he sat in the back row, Christmas mornings where he'd arrive with gifts and excuses for why he couldn't stay longer. We tried for 7 long, heartbreaking years to have children of our own. Every month brought disappointment. Every negative pregnancy test felt like a personal failure. I'd cry right here at this kitchen table while Vincent held me, promising me that our love was enough, that we'd find another way. What I didn't know was that Vincent was dying inside, watching me grieve for the children we couldn't have while knowing he already had a daughter who desperately needed him. The irony was crushing. I was mourning my inability to become a mother while his daughter was growing up, feeling abandoned by her father. In 1996, Catherine wrote, Isabella made you a Father's Day card at school. The teacher asked all the children to write about their dads, and Isabella wrote, my daddy loves me, but he can't live with me because it would make other people sad. Vincent, she's 12 years old, and she thinks she's the reason for all this sadness. This has to stop. But Vincent couldn't stop. The lies had grown too big, the deception too complete. How could he tell me he'd spent our entire marriage visiting another child while I cried about our infertility? How could he explain that he'd built his business success partly on the guilt money he sent to Catherine? When we decided to adopt in 1999, Vincent was terrified. What if I'm not a good father? He asked me one night. What if I don't know how to love a child properly? I thought he was just nervous about becoming a first-time father. I had no idea he was grappling with the knowledge that he'd already failed one child so completely. When David came into our lives in 2001, Vincent threw himself into fatherhood with an intensity that surprised me. He'd wake up for every night feeding, change diapers without complaint, spend hours reading bedtime stories in different voices. Now I understand he was trying to be the father to David that he'd never been to Isabella. But his dedication to David made the situation with Isabella even more painful. Catherine's letters from this period are heartbreaking. She sees you in the newspaper sometimes, at charity events or business functions with your family. She cuts out the pictures and keeps them in a shoebox. She's 17 now, Vincent. She's applying to colleges, and she still hopes you'll come to her graduation. Vincent didn't go to Isabella's graduation. Instead, he stayed home and celebrated David's first birthday, posting pictures on our refrigerator while his biological daughter graduated, valedictorian with an empty chair where her father should have been. When Emma joined our family in 2006, 5-year-old Isabella was struggling in college, working multiple jobs to pay for tuition because Vincent had gradually reduced his financial support as he focused on his adopted children. Catherine's final letter, dated September 2004, was desperate. Isabella is getting married next month. She's 19, probably too young, but she says she's tired of waiting for love that might never come. She wanted me to ask if you'd consider walking her down the aisle. I know it's impossible, but she's never stopped hoping you'd find a way to be part of her life openly. This is my last letter. Vincent, I can't keep watching my daughter break her heart over a father who's chosen his other family. We both deserve better than scraps of your attention. Vincent never replied to that letter. He couldn't. By then, Emma was calling him Daddy with such joy. David was playing Little League Baseball with Vincent as his coach, and our family seemed complete. The guilt was eating him alive, but he couldn't see a way to claim Isabella without destroying everything else. When Vincent was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's in 2018, I became not just his wife but his caregiver and memory keeper. What I didn't know was that losing his memory was almost a relief to Vincent. Finally, the weight of his secret would disappear with his failing mind. But as I went through his things after his death in March 2023, I realized the depth of his deception. Hidden bank statements showed regular transfers to an account in Millerville. Business records revealed construction jobs he'd done for free in Catherine's neighborhood, his way of helping without direct contact. There were even photos of Isabella at various ages, taken from a distance at her graduation, her wedding, the birth of her children. Vincent had been a grandfather for 5 years and never told me. Finding that metal box 3 months after Vincent's funeral shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage. But as I read letter after letter, I began to understand the impossible position Vincent had created for himself as a young man and then spent his entire adult life trying to navigate. When I called David and Emma, their reactions were different than I expected. David was hurt but also fascinated. He'd always wondered why Dad seemed to carry such sadness despite their happy family life. Emma was devastated, but also angry at Vincent for denying them a sister for so long. We could have helped, Emma said through tears. We could have found a way to include her. Instead, she grew up thinking we were the reason she couldn't have her father. It took weeks of private investigation to locate Isabella Morrison Fletcher. When David finally made contact, her response revealed the full cost of Vincent's choices. I spent my entire childhood thinking I wasn't good enough for my father to claim me. I graduated valedictorian, got a full scholarship to college, became a social worker helping children in foster care, all hoping that if I was good enough, accomplished enough, maybe he'd be proud enough to introduce me to his family. My mother died never having moved on from a man who visited her for 20 years, but could never commit to her. Meeting Isabella 6 months after Vincent's death was one of the hardest things I've ever done. She looked exactly like Vincent, same eyes, same stubborn chin, same way of tilting her head when thinking. But there was a wariness in her that broke my heart. The cautious distance of someone who'd learned not to expect too much from family. I don't blame you, she told me at our first meeting. You didn't know about me. But I need you to understand that Vincent's absence shaped everything about who I became. I work with abandoned children because I know what it feels like to be thrown away by someone who's supposed to love you unconditionally. It's taken almost a year, but we're slowly building something that resembles a family. Isabella's children, Vincent's grandchildren, are learning to know their aunt and uncle. David and Emma are processing the reality that their father, who seemed so devoted to family, had abandoned his first child. I've spent months trying to understand how the man I loved could have lived with such a devastating secret. Through therapy, through long conversations with Isabella, through reading every letter and document Vincent left behind, I've begun to see the impossible trap he created for himself. Vincent wasn't a villain. He was a frightened young man who made a terrible choice, and then spent 40 years too ashamed to fix it. Every year that passed made confession harder. Every milestone in our adopted children's lives made the betrayal seem larger. Every moment of happiness with our family came with the knowledge that Isabella was growing up without him. But understanding Vincent's fear doesn't excuse the damage his choices caused. Isabella grew up believing she was unlovable. Catherine never moved on from a relationship that was always incomplete, and I built my entire adult life on a foundation that was fundamentally false. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I sit here in this kitchen and wonder how many other families are built on secrets this deep. But here's what these months of pain and discovery have taught me. Love isn't diminished by secrets. but it's compromised by them. The love Vincent and I shared was real, but it was also limited by what he couldn't tell me. The family we built was beautiful, but it was incomplete. Isabella has taught me that healing is possible even from the deepest wounds, but it requires truth, time, and the willingness to sit with uncomfortable feelings. We can't undo Vincent's choices, but we can choose how to move forward from them. Vincent loved me completely within the boundaries he'd created for himself. He was a devoted father to David and Emma, and he was also an absent father to Isabella. People are complex, capable of great love and great harm simultaneously. This spring, Isabella and I are planning to plant a memorial garden for Vincent. Not just roses for love and forget-me-nots for memory, but also bleeding hearts, beautiful flowers that grow in the shade. Thriving in conditions that would kill other plants, it seems fitting. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the darkest places, fed by pain but reaching toward light. Isabella suggested the inscription for Vincent's memorial stone, "Beloved Father to those he claimed and those he couldn't." It's not the tribute I would have chosen a year ago, but it's honest. And honesty is what our family has been missing for too long. If you're reading this story and you're keeping a secret that could devastate the people you love, I want you to know something. The truth doesn't get easier with time, it only gets more devastating. Vincent died carrying his secret, but the secret didn't die with him. It exploded into our lives when we least expected it, causing pain that could have been avoided if he'd found the courage to tell the truth years ago. Your family might be stronger than you think. Your love might be deeper than your shame. The people who truly love you might surprise you with their capacity for forgiveness. But even if they can't forgive, living in truth is better than building a life on lies. Because secrets like Vincent's don't stay buried forever. They only grow more destructive in the darkness. And if you're the one who's been lied to, if you've discovered that your entire life was built on someone else's deception, know this: your love wasn't wasted, your family wasn't a lie, your happiness was real, even if it was incomplete. You get to decide what to do with the truth now that you have it. You can let it destroy everything, or you can use it to build something more honest, more complete, more resilient. Isabella could have rejected us entirely. Instead, she chose to help us understand Vincent's complicated legacy and to build a relationship with the siblings she'd never known she had. Vincent is gone now, buried with his secrets, finally exposed to the light. Some wounds he caused will never fully heal, but from the pain he left behind, we're growing something new, a family bound not just by love, but by truth. Tomorrow I'll be back in my garden, tending to the flowers Vincent planted, and the new ones Isabella and I will choose together. Because that's what you do when life breaks. You keep growing, keep loving, keep reaching toward the light. Even when you're rooted in darkness.